Hi, I'm here with Shane Scranton, the co-founder of IrisVR. We're going to get into a VR demonstration, but before we do that, we're going to let Shane tell us a little bit about himself and also his company, IrisVR. So Shane, take it away.
Thank you, Alexis. Hi, everyone. I'm Shane. I'm going to give a quick overview of Iris and some of the background before we go into the demos. So I was doing a lot of visualization work for architects and construction firms in like 3ds Max and Blender, creating visualizations for marketing, but also for design. And it was a very natural progression from the visualization world into VR when I started bringing in the early Oculus Rift goggles into these firms. It was very clear that that was actually what most firms wanted, and very quickly started taking VR seriously. This was about probably 3 years ago when we started working in VR and realized that there was really a big need in the industry for an easy way to use VR at firms. So our core goal really from the beginning, when we started Iris and we were starting to think about how do we actually enable this technology for the industry, was let's create an easy way to get 3D files of any sort that are used in the building industry. Let's get those 3D files very easily into a real-time engine. And what real-time means is really any engine that can work in AR or VR or really processes things on the fly. And that's really important for anything like the Oculus Rift or the mobile VR goggles or any of that. So how do we get 3D files quickly into a real-time engine and don't require a lot of work? So now we'll bring Alexis in for some of these demos to show off the actual fun stuff and the product demos. So come in, Alexis.
All right, this is exciting.
Yes, so have you ever tried any of this stuff before?
No,
okay.
I have not.
Great,
So, yeah.
That makes it a lot more fun. I'll go quickly over all the stuff on the table to make it a little clearer what we're looking at. So this almost laptop, I mean, it is a laptop, but it's about 15 pounds, so you know, take it with a grain of salt. But this is a VR rig that we have. We do like sort of running all this stuff off a desktop computer, but while we're traveling, we found that the laptop's pretty easy to set up. And what's hooked up to it is this guy, which is an Oculus Rift. This was pretty much the first headset company that really took off. They were bought by Facebook a couple of years ago, and then they had what was called the DK2. Well, first they had the DK1, which is the development kit 1, then the development kit 2, and those two kits were the ones that like really sort of solidified VR, I think, in sort of this generation, really got the energy going around it. This is their latest one. It's called the CV1, or the consumer version one, and it's the most polished one. So they did a nice job with the industrial design of it. You get like the headphones. You get sort of a very slick-looking design. It's still kind of goofy, but you get a slick-looking design. So you can hold that for a second. Before you put that on, I'll show you our software working. So the way it works is you open up a 3D modeling program. So we wanted to make this very easy, right? So if you're in the industry, you're in these 3D modeling tools all day, whether it's Revit or SketchUp or Rhino or one of these main CAD tools. And to our benefit, this is sort of taken off. Everyone's using BIM. Every new building going up has 3D models associated with it. So we wanted these 3D models to exist sort of very seamlessly in the goggles. So I'll open up this sample project here. And this is, of course, in Revit. And then the way this software works is you can go to a little plugin we have in each of these programs. And you'll see here's the building right here in its sort of native form. I can click View in VR, which is our plugin.
Oh, cool.
Pick this 3D view. And if we're doing it right, it really shouldn't require any training, right? So click Launch, and then it'll think about it for a second. And it's essentially processing all this 3D geometry. Then it boots up in our software. I can click Launch. And then this stage is a lot of our sort of like secret sauce. We're doing a lot of like mesh compression, texture compression, making it sort of smooth and streamlined so it's comfortable in VR. And that's all it took. So it was about 30 seconds from Revit into VR, and then it'll show up when you strap the goggles on. So you're almost ready to. I'll show you the controls really quickly.
I'm like super excited to get into it.
So hold it like this. I should also say that this is all well and good. I like the Vive a lot more. The Vive is another headset because you have wands, so you can actually move your hands around. Unfortunately, this is going to be sort of locked in place here. But this A button will teleport you to different spots in the model. This is forward and back, and this is left and right. So the main button you really need to know is this A button.
All right, so
you can put that on.
Probably
Keep that loose. There you go.
All right. Whoa.
There you go. So now you're in. So tap that
wow.
A button one more time, and now you can look around, and you can see you're
gosh.
in the building model.
I want to like walk around in it.
So you can a little bit, but because you can't see where you are, I recommend not walking too much.
Okay.
So you can do it with the controllers instead.
Okay. Oh, that. Oh, that's right. So
Yep,
I can do. Whoa.
And then that right joystick will turn your body, so you don't have to do it in real life.
Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, now I feel like I've completely lost myself in like real space.
Yeah, and I'm the voice in the clouds.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Oh my gosh, this is so neat.
So you can see the point of this is like if you're a client and you want to walk through a space before it's built, like you can really understand what you're going to get before it's actually in existence. So I'll show you a couple other cool things.
There's someone out here with me.
So this menu that I just brought up, if you look at like the sun position, now look at like the plus. So that will change the sun position.
Wow.
And we'll go into nighttime. There you go, twilight. And that's what I meant by a real-time engine too, is we can change things like that on the fly. So you can adjust the model, you can move through it. But really, I mean, as you saw, a whole part of this is the speed to get these models in. It's not totally photoreal, but it is fast. So if you make a change to your model or you want to go back and edit it with the client, you can bring it back into VR in like 20 seconds, 30 seconds.
Welcome back. Again, I'm here with Shane Scranton, the co-founder of IrisVR, and since Shane's in our hot seat, we're going to get into our Q&A session. So first thing I'd like to do is just kind of know the differences between how VR works with different segments of the AEC industry. So how do construction companies leverage it differently than, say, architects and designers?
It's a good question. I mean, the answer we're still sort of figuring out. There is the very sort of high level, I would say, easy answers, which is both segments of the industry are using it quite a lot in the client interface. Anytime sort of there's a review of floor plans or of renderings, it makes quite a lot of sense to have VR there and present as well. We're also seeing it during sort of the pitching phase where someone's trying to win a project. That sort of does span across both segments as well. We're seeing frequently that architects are definitely much more set on, and I think this is sort of obvious, but architects are much more set on the visual fidelity. We get a lot more requests for like interior lighting and ways to do even accurate sound. And there's quite a lot more like, let's say, visual fidelity requests. The construction world, actually literally the last construction meeting I had, the request was for a tape measure and ways to do like tags on elements so that they could do some sort of punch list. So I would say, I'm generalizing because I think both industries very much want workflow tools and they also want visual fidelity, but there is definitely different weights per industry.
So, if a company is wanting to get into VR or start to leverage it, they need software and hardware, correct?
Yeah, so there's the stuff I showed you is sort of the high-end VR with the full-blown computer setup. Those range from like $2,000 to $4,000. And then the goggles, which range from like $600 to $1,000. So you are looking at like a full setup between like $3,000 and $5,000. With that said, you can get sort of a taste of VR and an appetizer for like $5 from a Google Cardboard. And I mean that is sort of, I'm not a huge fan of cardboard because it does make people a little sick and it's not totally immersive. However, it's a great entry point in. So we are really pushing the full VR setups, especially for enterprise. It's a really sort of immediate way to have a lot of client success and a lot of, we think, sort of success in the first couple meetings with VR. And we think it pays for itself pretty quickly. But from a consumer angle and even from like an exploration angle, some of the cheaper solutions like cardboard are an easy in.
What has adoption so far been like within the AEC for AR or for AR VR?
Yeah, we exist because it was steep adoption. We were actually expecting it to be much slower than it has been. A lot of credit goes to Oculus shipping their second development kits. About, I guess like a year and a half ago, we just noticed that like when we went to conferences, when we asked if people had tried VR, pretty much everyone started saying like, oh, we got an Oculus DK2. And we thought it was going to take a little longer for everyone to uptake, but because the DK2 was about $350, pretty much literally every firm we talked to at conferences had at least one. So the very early sort of segments of the market were adopting it fairly quickly about a year ago, and now I'd say like that you can get them on Prime or that they're more accessible to buy. We're getting much faster adoption now. In terms of numbers, we have about 17,000 signups, and about a year ago we had, about a year and a half ago we had 1,000. So wow, that is the difference.
Incredible, yeah. When you said you were at conferences and people were the majority of companies had already adopted it, would you say they were like in their early stages of like, had they just bought it basically and were still trying to figure it out, or were they leveraging it like to a pretty good extent? So
a lot of the sets were just collecting dust. Like a lot of these firms got one because they heard it was cool, but then like the problem with buying a development kit is it's like specifically for software development, and there like wasn't much content out there. Right. So I think the jury's still out on if it ultimately will have hurt the industry to adopt these early kits, because they like really weren't production ready. And if you plugged it into your computer, like there wasn't anything to do with it really. Like ideally you downloaded Iris's betas and you played around with it, but like in terms of the whole ecosystem, there wasn't too much. So yeah, a lot of those firms got one and then were like, we have no idea what to do with this. So there was definitely also an educational component of teaching people what a game engine was, what real-time was, what Iris is, and getting people sort of educated on that and then up to speed with that.
I'm glad you said that about, you mentioned the education, because that's where I was like, my head, or the wheels in my head were turning like, is it an education thing? Like, are people just not, like, is there just nothing out there for people to kind of make that step? Like, okay, you have the technology, but like, now you need to know what to do with it. Is that like something that's just not out there for companies to, or do they just not look for it, or?
Oh yeah, I think it's getting there. I just think it's like, this is, what's so interesting about this wave of VR is it's effectively only been launched for about 6 to 8 months, right? Like we are very much the early days. Like the analogy we used a year ago is like, you guys are trying iPhone 0. Like there is literally like, this is the beginning. And so it's very natural for there to be a lot of confusion and a lot of like sort of exploration into the space. So I don't really see it as a negative. I just see it as sort of like a necessary component of a brand new technology. Is there's quite a lot of new terms. The industry has never had to work with game engines before. Right. The industry has never had to think about frame rate or polygon count or like any of that stuff. So there's like or like dealing with those computers, like all of that is new. So I think that it's normal that there's an educational component, but I do think that it's highest priority. I mean, we spend a lot of time on everything from our knowledge base to educational videos, and the other people in the industry do too.
Okay, cool. We talked about, how the AEC has adopted it very quickly. There was like a steep adoption curve. What about that compared to other industries? Do you think it was like as steep?
I'm very biased, yeah. But I do think that there is such an immediate, VR solves so many immediate needs for like architects and contractors and builders that like, I would be very surprised if there was another industry besides gaming that took it up as quickly. These goggles sort of out of the gate were made for gamers, so I'm certain that these goggles were adopted most there. We've seen quite a lot of adoption in like healthcare, some in simulation and training, some in automotive, some in product design, but in terms of the majority of players in the space, we see primarily in AEC. And I do think that AEC might be one of the biggest drivers of VR for the first like 3 to 5 years of the technology.
That's incredible. Yeah. That's really.
But I will say I'm very biased. Like that is specifically my job to make sure that happens. So like, yes, I believe that that's it.
Well, we'll make sure that that bias stays going strong. Yes. So, okay, so right now, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but it seems, your clients or architects, designers, construction companies, they're the ones with the software, they bring their clients in, or maybe they transport it kind of like you did here today, where they bring the kit out to wherever they're going to kind of give the design, give that demonstration, to whoever they're trying to either sell their project on or something like that. Do you think we're ever going to get to a point where the majority of offices, whether large or small, or households, are going to have, VR setups in their office or house So where now a designer can just like send over like the rendering, send over the file and be like, and someone kind of like can put it on Google Drive, they can take it and then view it in their own home. Do you ever think it's going to be that popular?
Yes, and sort of we're basing a lot of our company off that assumption. And it comes down to like, I mean, when I show my parents, they immediately, like their first reaction after they've tried, I mean, not necessarily trying out building models, but when they try out some of the experiences in VR, I mean, their immediate reaction is, how do we get this, right? And I think a lot of people have that reaction, and that they're reacting to essentially like early development kits. So like, we have a lot of faith in the technology evolving over the next couple of years to be really something that is absolutely widespread. I will say more immediately, I mean, we are already seeing larger clients of architecture firms and of construction companies. We are seeing some clients actually going out and buying goggles so they can, like the clients themselves can download Prospect and use some of the building models that their architects are sending them to try out VR. So it's really cool to see clients already starting to adopt VR with the sort of express purpose of walking through the designs that their providers are making. So I think it's already happening a little bit. And I do think also as mobile gets much more polished and gets much more immersive, it'll be a no-brainer. I mean, don't quote me on this, but like iPhone 10 might have like a VR component, right? Or like, I think it's going to be very natural for consumer-grade phones to have quite a lot of VR horsepower behind them.
What are some new applications for the technology that could come up that maybe most people like myself who aren't like experts in it would think about? Like, what are things that I wouldn't even think about that VR could be? I
think that there's a game out there that just came out called Rec Room, and it's anyone that's tried it will laugh at that reference, because it's a game and it's very stupid. You're like you're in a gym with other players and you're like throwing balls at each other and playing frisbee or whatever. But what it does very well is shows the power of collaborative VR and of multiplayer VR. And I think that there is so much potential to have multiple people in a space together, moving through and doing things together in that space. So that has an immediate sort of correlation to the way teams work in the building industry. So there could be so much time sort of saved traveling. You could do things so much quicker if you could loop a ton of people into the same experience and move around it together. So I'm very excited about the multiplayer and sort of collaborative components of VR, and I think the gaming industry is showing that it's very powerful and very fun. Yeah.
So are we going to have like virtual reality meetings where we're all maybe not in the office, but you know,
absolutely.
we're all, that
totally.
is so cool.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
I think that's inevitable, and I think that it's I'm going to be very curious to see when that really starts happening. I think we'll probably talk about this in a bit, but I think it will tie in nicely to like the rise of AR, and I think that it'll be interesting to see when there's enough headsets dispersed that it makes sense to have collaboration. I think also it's why Facebook bought Oculus. I mean, they see the power of like hanging out with your friends and having your social experiences in a virtual world. So that has a nice sort of correlation too.
Well, we are going to talk about AR because I know the last time we spoke with you and your partner, Nate, I believe you guys had said that the hardware and software right now for AR it just needs to catch up in order for it to be a reality. And so, you know, now that it's been several months, are we seeing, has it started to catch up, or are we still kind of in a phase where it's just not quite there yet? Mm-hmm. I don't know, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and AR is used much more liberally, like sort of, I mean, Pokemon Go was called AR. AR is very interesting because it has sort of all of these, and Pokemon Go was technically AR. The way we're defining AR is really sort of a head-mounted unit that draws things on top of your world in an accurate sort of spatial way. And you know, Pokemon Go wasn't that. It sort of looked at your one camera and sort of figured out where to put a little Pokemon. But it was sort of a first step in sort of public acceptance of that technology. And Microsoft HoloLens has been really fantastic at establishing much more of our definition of AR, specifically with their partnership with Trimble. We've seen them getting the HoloLens and a lot of the AR technology into some early sort of pilot firms. All of that's to say that I think you know, the Oculus Rift and the Vive, you can go onto Amazon and buy them today, and they'll ship to your door, and they'll be relatively stable, and they'll work pretty good. AR, I think, is a couple more years away from that. It's still very much in the development kit phase, but that's okay. There's a lot more to AR that needs to work properly to have an effective experience. And The reason for that is VR has a totally controlled environment, right? You're in your digital world. You don't need to like take cues from the outside world, but in our industry, the beauty of AR would be like going onto a job site and just like seeing your BIM model just like on the job site, and like there's your template for building it. Right. To do that accurately, you need really good external tracking. You need the device's battery to last a long time. You need to be able to handle a lot of geometry, and to do all of that wirelessly is just really difficult. So AR is going to be a couple more generations, I think, before we hit that really sort of awesome sweet spot. But in the interim, I think it's still very useful in its current iteration and with like the HoloLens.
If, you know, when the technology does catch up with that, do you plan on making the jump into AR as well, like making your technology work seamlessly with that as well, and software?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I personally think that VR is very much sort of a stepping stone to AR, because I think if you have very good AR, you can make it virtual when you want it virtual, but then you can also have it augmented when you want it augmented. So I think these devices are all going to get smaller. They're all going to sort of get closer to mobile, and then at some point they just sort of merge into AR and it becomes one technology. So we're very much like, Iris specifically is more of a real-time company. Like we prepare these files to run really well in a real-time environment, and that could be AR or VR or even screen-based at some point. So.
Well, I look forward to having you back when that gets there, and then we can have my first AR experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got to bring the HoloLens in at some point. Yeah. It's awesome too.
Yeah.
It's a different experience, but it's just as valuable.
Well, we'd love that. I know I'd love that because that was really cool today. Thank you again so much for coming in and showing us this technology, for giving me my first VR demonstration. Hopefully I wasn't too strange, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It was really fun.